This message has no affiliation with the Department of War. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm super excited for this episode, so let's go ahead and dive in. Picture this: a kingdom built on promises of the American dream, but the crown is forged from debt, nearly $1.84 trillion in student loans, over 43 million Americans chained to payments that steal their freedom. This isn't fantasy. This is what happens when big government hijacks higher education. Welcome to the Game of Loans, a hard-hitting conservative look at how federal meddling and endless subsidies are crippling our economy and our people. This episode discusses financial hardship, delayed dreams, and government overreach. All data from public sources like the Federal Reserve, Department of Education, and 26 reports. So let's expose the throne of debt and reclaim the American dream. Stick around because this is an episode you do not want to miss. This is the Martin Memo. The Martin Memo. All right, welcome back in. A new tradition on my show is to pray. So I invite you to pray in your faith as I pray in mine. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for a beautiful day that you have bestowed upon us. Thank you for all the wonderful people who are watching today, and I ask that my words can go far and touch lives today. Lord, please watch over our country and watch over the troops who are overseas and beyond. Lord, thank you so much for all the opportunities that you have blessed us with. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you so much for praying with me. Let's start with the cold, hard numbers, because this isn't some natural disaster or personal, irresponsible run amok. This is the predictable, engineered result of decades of big government meddling in what should be free market transactions between students, families, and schools. Now, as of early 2026, the latest snapshots from the Education Data Initiative, Lending Tree, and Federal Reserve reports, total U.S. student loan debt stands at approximately $1.84 trillion. Think about how big of a number that is. That is how much student loan debt we currently have in America. Federal loans alone dominate at $1.69 trillion, owed by roughly 42.8 to 43 million borrowers. That's about 1 in 6 American adults saddled with this burden. And it's only growing after a 2023 to 24 dip, adding tens of billions year over year. Student debt remains the third largest consumer debt category. That's right behind mortgages and auto loans. But unlike those, it's largely backed by taxpayers with no collateral and zero market checks. And the average federal balance for one of these? At around $39,547 per borrower, including private loans, and it climbs to $43,000. But averages hide the real pain points. The median is lower, often around $24,000 to $30,000, meaning many owe manageable amounts, while a huge chunk are drowning deep. And this is not a young person issue anymore. Age breakdowns tell the story of generational theft. Borrowers between the ages of 50 to 61 carry the heaviest load, averaging over $48,000, with millions still owing $20,000 and more as retirement looms. That is right. People in their 50s and 60s who should be building nest eggs or, contributing to their grandchildren are still paying off degrees from decades ago. That is insane. And the numbers do not get any better, unfortunately. Ages 35 to 49, they average about $45,000. Ages 25 to 34, they're around $33,000 to $34,000. And under 24 are just at $14,000. But they're only beginning the climb into this trap. Demographics expose the unfairness baked into the system. Black borrowers often carry $25,000 more debt than their white peers just 4 years after graduation. For a system that's supposed to be so fair and equitable, that's what they like to call it. Now, black women, they face some of the highest burdens, with averages pushing $41,000 in undergrad debt categories. Hispanics and Native American families see elevated risks as well. Women overall borrow more and repay slower under these distorted incentives. These are not coincidence. Federal subsidies promised a ladder up, but delivered a debt ceiling that hits working class and minority families hardest, trapping them in cycles of dependency instead of self-reliance. Now, with that all being said, here is where the real outrage begins to shine through. The delinquency and default explosion. Post-pandemic pause ended, payments restarted under the current administration's framework, and rates just skyrocketed. It is unreal. The recent 2026 analysis from the Century Foundation, Protect Borrowers, and others show nearly 25% of borrowers with payments due are behind. That is almost triple the pre-pandemic level of 9%. That's roughly 7.9 million new delinquencies in 2025 alone. And defaults, those are at record highs as well. Close to 9 million federal borrowers in default or are teetering on the edge. That is the largest number that we have ever seen. Over $208 billion in ED-held debt is effectively in default. That's billion with a B, by the way. Black and Native borrowers near 50% in delinquency, and Pell Grant recipients, which is often for the lower income individuals, that's at 27%. This is not a crisis that just snuck up on us. It is the direct, foreseeable consequence of the Bennett hypothesis, the idea first articulated by former Education Secretary William Bennett in 1987, that federal financial aid enables colleges to raise tuition with impunity. And study after study backed this. The New York Fed found colleges capture about 60 cents of every dollar in increased federal subsidy loan limits through higher prices. And Pell Grants, they're not much better as well, around 37 cents on the dollar. When government guarantees loans with taxpayer money and no real risk to lenders or schools, colleges face zero pressure to compete on price or value. When this happens, tuition soars, administrative bloat explodes, and families, not them, families get stuck with the bill. And the Department of Education, it is the enforcer in this racket, a massive bureaucracy that has ballooned over decades, spending billions annually to manage this mess while pushing more easy credit. Instead of fostering competition and accountability, it holds real, practical education hostage, propping up overpriced, low ROI programs filled with fluff courses that don't lead to jobs. And guess what? The taxpayers foot the administrative overhead, colleges get rich, and borrowers, especially from modest backgrounds, end up in a debt spiral they never signed up for. This scale is not accidental. It is big government's throne, erected on the backs of hardworking families, enabled by endless subsidies that removed every incentive for fiscal responsibility. And the pain is only beginning to show in defaults, garnished wages, and shattered credit. Now, let's bring it down to the individual level, because behind every statistic is a hardworking American family that's paying the price for Washington's failed experiments in central planning. Big government promised to make college accessible through endless subsidies and guaranteed loans. Instead, it inflated costs, removed market discipline, and left millions trapped in a cycle of debt that delays dreams, destroys credit, and erodes personal responsibility. Fidelity's 2026 State of the Student Debt Study lays it bare. 1/3 of current borrowers have delayed buying a home because of their loans. For Gen Z, it's 37%. Millennials, 36%. That's millions of young families watching their peers build equity and stability while they're stuck renting and paying interest to the government instead of building wealth. Surveys from Realtor.com and others show that 1 in 4 college grads with debt say it pushed home ownership back by an average of 10 years. 10 years. That is a lost decade of compounding gains, family security, and generational progress. In states like North Carolina, payments can delay down payment savings by over 7 years. Borrowers describe it plainly. I worked hard, got the degree, but now I'm chained in place while others move forward. This isn't bad luck. This is not a string of bad luck. It is the direct result of federal subsidies letting colleges charge whatever they want, knowing Uncle Sam will foot the bill and families will borrow to cover it. How disgusting is that? Man, this education system is pitiful. Moving on to retirement now. Retirement takes an even deeper hit. Fidelity's internal data shows employees over 50 with student debt have retirement balances 30% lower than peers without it. That is an average of $153,000 versus $221,000. That's a big difference. For ages 18 to 49, it's 20% lower, $58,000 to $72,000. Borrowers feel less confident about retirement. Many admit uncertainty about how much to save. Think about that. People who took personal responsibility, they went to school, they got degrees, and they entered the workforce, are now decades behind because government-backed loans encouraged overborrowing and price gouging. Employer programs that match student payments could add $200,000 to retirement over time. But most don't have that luxury because the system rewards inefficiency, not innovation. Credit damage is brutal and long-lasting as well, with delinquency spiking to nearly 25% in 2026. Again, that is triple pre-pandemic levels. Borrowers are seeing scores just completely nosedive and plummet. Recent analysis shows average drops of 57 points in just months for those behind. For about 2 million who started near prime, scores fell 100 points from an average of 680 down to an average of 580, plunging them into deep subprime territory. All of that means is just higher interest on cars, denied apartments, job rejections requiring credit checks, even barriers to professional licenses. And wage garnishment looms for defaulters as well, turning a missed payment into a lifelong penalty. This isn't forgiveness territory anymore. It is a punishment for a system that removed skin in the game from everyone except the borrower and taxpayer. The mental and emotional toll is perhaps the most insidious. Fidelity finds 41% of borrowers lose sleep or feel anxious about finances at least weekly, and they are twice as likely to carry medical debt on top and nearly 50% more stressed about healthcare costs. 2/3 describe their relationship with money as overwhelming, with 34% calling it outright stressful. And it doesn't get any better either. Research links student debt to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and in extreme cases, suicidal ideation, especially among those already economically vulnerable. Borrowers report chronic stress affecting health, relationships, and work focus. Some redirect funds from groceries or emergencies to interest payments, deepening the hole. Think about how sad that is. Instead of getting your typical food, maybe you only have to live off ramen because you can't afford your student loan debt because of what the government is doing. And social media studies show overwhelming negative tones. Hopelessness, anger, shame. This isn't weakness. It is the human cost when government promises free or easy access but delivers dependency and despair. They are creating a generation that is depending on the government above anything else. Beyond homes and retirement, the delays stack up across life. 47% postpone travel, 29% postpone big purchases, 20% postpone starting families, 19% postpone career changes, and 17% postpone launching businesses. Gen Z reports even higher rates. The generation that was most sold on college for all now faces the harshest reality check. What conservatives have always known is true. True upward mobility comes from personal responsibility, hard work, and market accountability, not endless federal handouts that distort incentives and punish the responsible. These aren't isolated hardships. They are predictable fallouts when the big government removes consequences for colleges and lenders, leaving families to bear the burden alone. The American dream is not dying. It is being held hostage by the very system that claimed to protect it. Here's where the damage spreads far beyond individual families, straight into the heart of the American economy. Student debt doesn't just burden borrowers. It acts like a slow bleed tax on growth, strangling the very engine of prosperity conservatives champion: free enterprise, entrepreneurship, and personal initiative. Monthly payments, often $200 to $500, maybe even more, put billions out of circulation every year. That money doesn't go towards cars, homes, vacations, local shops, or investments. Instead, it flows straight to Washington or loan services. The Conference Board and others have flagged this as a real headwind for consumer spending, especially after the 2023 to 25 repayment starts. RSM Economics estimated repayments create a modest but persistent drag, around 0.3% of GDP in restart years. Not a full recession, but a recession-like restraint that slows retail, services, and overall demand. With delinquency at nearly 25% in 2026 and defaults nearing 9 million, as we previously talked about, this extraction compounds. Credit scores tank, borrowing dries up, and millions lock themselves out of markets entirely. The GDP impact is clear and it is frustrating. Reduced consumption and investment weakens demand. While higher education should boost productivity and wages, and it does when the markets can effectively work, federal distortion flips the script. Borrowers take safer, higher paying but less innovative jobs. They avoid risks that drive growth. Entrepreneurship, the backbone of American innovation and job creation, suffers the most. The Philadelphia Federal Reserve's landmark research shows high student debt correlates with 14% fewer new small businesses in high debt areas. These tiny firms rely on personal credit and savings, exactly what debt chokes. A great example of this: an 8% increase in county-level student debt resulted in 70 fewer new businesses per county. A nationwide 14% drop in small firm formation between 2000 and 2010. Those are effects that still persist today. And yes, you can't blame student loans entirely on that, right? You have big corporations like Amazon who really choked a lot of that small business competition out. But to say it's not partially because of student loan debt is a fallacy. The Kauffman Foundation and other studies echo this very thing. Would-be entrepreneurs with heavy debt are 11% less likely to start if owing over $30,000. Gallup-Purdue data shows grads without debt start businesses at rates far higher than those buried in loans, which sort of makes sense, right? Fewer startups mean fewer jobs. Small businesses create most new employment in the United States. Debt reduces business income, deters investments in existing firms, and limits access to capital. Inequality widens under the system as well. Subsidies promised mobility but delivered traps instead, hitting Black, Hispanic, and lower-income families hardest with higher delinquency and slower repayment. Delayed home ownership weakens generational health. Lower retirement savings strains future safety nets. Overall, it's a macroeconomic anchor. Slower mobility, reduced innovation, persistent restraints on full recovery. This is not what we want. And this drag isn't inevitable. It's the predictable failure of big government central planning, removing consequences for colleges, lenders, and borrowers while taxpayers foot the bill. Make that make sense. Free markets reward efficiency and value. Washington's subsidies reward bloat and dependency. And what is the result of all this? The result is an economy that is held back, entrepreneurs who are sidelined, and the American dream deferred for millions who just wanted to work hard and get ahead. We have laid out the scale of this trillion-dollar empire, the human suffering it inflicts on families trying to do right by their kids, and the broad economic drag that's holding back free enterprise in the American dream. But the root of it all, the real evil, sinister villain out there, is big government itself. For decades, Washington has taken the education system hostage, using the bloated Department of Education as its enforcer while pumping endless subsidies and guaranteed loans into a broken market. Conservatives have warned about this for years. The federal government created the problem it now pretends to solve. I don't know if you guys have seen this meme before, but it's like the SpongeBob meme, and he's looking for this he's looking for this person that had done something wrong, and he's like, oh, I wonder who it is, and it's in the background there's a picture of he's the actual culprit. That's kind of what it feels like. That was a terrible example, but that is exactly what it feels like. The Bennett hypothesis, proven by study after study, shows us colleges capture 60 cents of every dollar in federal aid through higher tuition, which I know we've talked about before, but this explains why costs exploded. Easy federal money removed any incentive for schools to compete on price or value. Instead, we got administrative bloat, luxury campuses, and endless fluff courses that don't lead to any sort of jobs. The Department of Education ballooned into a massive bureaucracy, not educating anyone, but managing debt traps, enforcing dependency, and shielding colleges from real accountability. This is why we have DEI crap programs built into almost all of the colleges. Recent reforms like the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and proposed rules starting in mid-2026 are steps in the right direction, but they are like Band-Aids on a gaping wound. These changes blunt some inflation and shift more risk to borrowers, but they don't dismantle the core issue: federal overreach holding real, practical education captive. Taxpayers foot the bill for inefficiency. Families get stuck with debt. Colleges keep raising prices knowing Uncle Sam will backstop it. This isn't compassion. It is control, creating moral hazard where responsibility evaporates and dependency only grows. And the good news in all this, we don't have to accept this. Conservatives have clear market-based solutions to break the chains and restore freedom. To echo the late great Charlie Kirk, here are some of my ideas that I have thought of. First, push aggressively for 3-year bachelor's degrees. Cut the fluff, the ideological electives, redundant gen ed requirements, and low-value courses, and focus on core skills that lead to real careers. This could save families 25% on total costs right away, get graduates into the workforce a year earlier, and reduce borrowing needs dramatically. Momentum is building. States like Massachusetts and Oklahoma are exploring accelerated 90-credit pathways, and it's a policy that appeals across the spectrum because it lowers barriers without dumbing down any of the education. Why force 4 years when 3 can deliver the value without the indoctrination that happens on the college campuses? Secondly, phase the federal government out completely. Full stop. End federal loan guarantees and subsidies that distort the market. Return lending to private banks, students, and families, where real skin in the game forces accountability. Banks won't fund worthless degrees. Families will choose wisely when they're on the hook. No more taxpayer bailouts for overpriced institutions. This restores competition, drives down costs naturally, and ends the cycle of dependency. Recent shifts under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act show the private market stepping in where federal limits create gaps. Let's accelerate that to full freedom. Third and finally, unleash aggressive business tax credits to encourage the creation and expansion of skill-based schools, trade programs, and registered apprenticeships. Offer meaningful incentives like $2,000 to $6,000 per apprentice or credits for infrastructure investments so employers can train the workforce they need without relying on bloated indoctrination camp universities. Bills like the Apprenticeship Infrastructure Tax Credit Act and state-level models proves this works. Businesses invest in practical skills, workers earn while learning, and we build real pathways to middle-class success. No more forcing everyone through a 4-year factory. Let markets reward the results. These are not radical ideas. They are common sense returns to principles that built America: personal responsibility, limited government, and free enterprise. The debt throne is heavy, don't get me wrong, but it can be built on sand. Awareness and action can topple it. If you're feeling the weight, delayed homes, retirement shortfalls, endless payments, know that you are not alone and change is possible, and perhaps it's right around the corner. And with that being said, it is time to move into my favorite segment of the week, the cold monologue. For those of you who do not know what the cold monologue is, you ask us questions throughout the week, we put it in a hat, and then I answer it, and you get my pure, authentic response. So let's see what we have in store for today. You keep talking about Martin Media LLC. What is it? Great question. Well, Martin Media LLC is the product of my own creation. I'm actually wearing this shirt today, funny enough. But we are aiming to put Christian conservative commentary right at the center. So we are creating an app where you are going to get Christian conservative commentary on all aspects. I'm talking about politics, I'm talking about religion, history, science, sports, everything, all inclusive on one app. We are debuting that July 1st. Super excited for that. We have currently 7 contributors who are going to help with this project. We're actually going to get ready to do a conference here in the upcoming months in wake of the midterms. We're doing a lot, and this company is going to be built on Christian conservative principles because that is what's best for America. We're super excited. We're super humble. I have an amazing team. We're working day in and day out to provide a quality product for you all. So please stay tuned. This is an app you are not going to want to miss. I know I say that often, but you're not going to want to miss this one. So again, July 1st, we are launching. And just to give you all a snapshot, normally we're going to be charging roughly $15, $20 a month. But if you get it within that first month of July 1st to August 1st, if you get it between then, you are going to get it for a much cheaper rate. We're talking about a cup of Joe from Starbucks, right? It's going to be cheap, but we're super excited to give it to you all. We're going to have someone who's leading a daily devotional in the morning where they're going to pray over you if you put any prayers in the comments, where they're going to read a scripture, reflect on it, and say a blessing to start your mornings out right. And then, of course, you're going to get me and others commentating on sports, politics, history, everything. Additionally, we're going to be doing a founder series where we go over the big prominent figures who founded this country. So we'll go to their estates. We'll do a little documentary on each of them. We're super excited and honored for that. So just stay tuned. I promise you, this is going to be an app that is going to be revolutionary. We call it the future of media. So I cannot wait to see you all there for the debut of that product coming in only a few months from now. So all the blessings and prayers can be used because this is stressful, but it's well worth it, and we cannot wait to debut it. With that all being said, folks, that is all we have in store for today. So be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Martin Memo, and do not forget to subscribe on YouTube. Now, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. This is The Martin Memo. God bless.
The Martin Memo.